Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I have another Evercade cart that I'm going to kind of do a brief overview of this week while I have time. I've been spending a decent amount of time with this one, trying to make up my mind what I think about on some of the games, because some of them are easy to love and some of them are not so easy to love, at least for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Gaelco collection here. Essentially, this is another group of arcade games that we're going to go through in not any real specific order. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with one of the ones that there's at least two on here that I'm not a huge fan of. And it's not anything to do with the game. The game plays fine. I'm just not the hugest fan. So let's go ahead and go into those, because they're both sports games. So we have Snowboard Championship. This is basically a downhill skiing challenge where you have to go from the top of the hill down to the bottom of the hill in roughly about 50 seconds. Difficulty goes up between each stage. There doesn't really appear to be any pennants or anything you have to weave around. There's like ramps and loops and things of that nature that are on the actual stage that you can go through to kind of earn some extra points and things like that. It's not necessarily a bad game. It plays fine, it handles well, the graphics are just fine for the 16-bit era. I could see somebody who was really kind of into early snowboarding games really digging this game. It just wasn't for me. And the reason is I'm just not big into sports games. And if I'm not into a sports game, I'm not going to really recommend a sports game. So, being that I'm generally not into any kind of sports games, I had an okay time with it. It wasn't one that I see myself going back to too much. I made it through like one or two tracks at best. And then I was basically just repeating again and again and again, trying to get a little bit better and make it through any of the courses at all. I'm pretty terrible at it for one, and it just wasn't engaging enough that I really wanted to dump a ton of time into it personally. More power to those of you that do. Graphically, it's great. The music's great. Everything about it's nice as far as the design. It just wasn't catching my interest. So that one in particular, not so much for me. The next one on here that's really not for me too much is the World Rally. Now, this is basically like a rally championship kind of thing. It's sort of like a single player, single entry, race through the course, try to make it under a certain amount of time. I didn't really find anything in there that said that you would do more than just race against the clock in this. There didn't seem to be any other racers. You were just trying to beat a specific time. I'm assuming the leaderboards are determined by time. I was only really able to finish like one track total in the entire time I played it, and I must have ran like 20-30 races to even do that. I was really bad at this one. Sound effects are good. The graphics are good again. For the era of game that it is, which is I think like the early 90s, it's actually designed pretty nice, but once again, it's kind of a racing / sports game, and I've never really been prone to enjoy those too much. And there weren't really any selection of cars, there was just the one car, so it wasn't striking my fancy. There was no way to upgrade the car, there was only the one car. There were multiple tracks, and the tracks were interesting and fairly challenging, but with only one car and no way to upgrade it and no one to race against, I didn't really feel very drawn into this. I guess you could probably do two player on this and maybe have a bit of fun with it that way if you're racing against each other. But for my money, that really wasn't one of the ones that really drew me into this card at all. Now, with that said, we're going to go into some of the ones that I'm a little more sketchy on, and then we'll get to the ones that I really liked out of this card. There were at least 2 or 3 that I truly enjoyed out of this card. And then the rest of them were kind of on the fence on whether or not I really liked them or if they were just kind of passable. The next one up is Thunderhop. Thunderhop is a solid enough game for what it is. It's kind of got like a DBZ look for the main character. You're basically playing like a guy who's a human antivirus trying to destroy these viruses that this like evil scientist released to get his revenge on humanity for reasons. I don't know, it's kind of bizarre. The art style is kind of neat, but the gameplay's a little slow. The firing rate's good, but the jumping's kind of slow. Some of the enemies fire in kind of odd patterns. It just, I don't know, there's something about the difficulty and the hovering and the jump and how it wasn't super tight that made it feel a little to me. I want to give this one some more time. Right now I'm kind of still heavily on the fence of it. I only beat like 2, maybe 3 stages on it total during the time that I played it, and I played it for a good couple of hours, I want to say. It's actually quite a challenging game, so if you're looking for kind of a challenging arcade retro game, this one may be right up your alley. It's got good character designs, it's got interesting platforming. The platforming's fairly tight, but the jump is kind of floaty, and sometimes you can kind of get overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's just on the screen. There were a couple times where I thought I had landed on something and I was just off to the side and I got hit. The boss patterns can be, they're not the most random on the cart, but they're a little on the weird side, and some of them are kind of hard to dodge, basically to get used to the jumping mechanics enough to be able to pull that off. But overall, it's a pretty fun game. I don't think it's my absolute favorite on the cart, but it's one I feel like I kind of want to go spend some more time on. The next up is Glass, which initially I was pretty stoked on this game. Essentially, you're in like this little spaceship thing that basically flies around. You're trying to collect all the tiles on the stage to complete the stage, while monsters come out and try to kill you, or try to lay more tiles and kill you. Once you complete 3 stages, there's a boss stage, and there's roughly 8 worlds. The boss stage is where this game kind of falls apart on itself a little bit, and it's where I had the most problems with it. Primarily because you have to one-shot the boss. You can't continue and fight the boss from where you're at, otherwise this would be a fairly punishing but beatable game. The fact that you have to beat the boss on the singular life makes this one almost more challenging than it's worth. Because it's not quite that fun and the bosses feel very erratic. Their attack patterns feel erratic, their movements feel erratic, their hitbox is big, they're big, their weapons have a large hitbox, and you can't fire while moving, so you have to move, fire, move. So it makes for a fairly challenging boss experience. The rest of it gets fairly hectic and crazy, but stays fun and challenging enough to where you're still engaged and having a good time with it. And the bosses, while being creative and cool looking, just are like very frustrating to deal with over long terms, particularly when there's like more than one attacking you at a time, which there's multiple bosses in the boss fight, which happens on at least 2 of the stages. It happens at the end, I think, of stage 2, and I know it happens at the end of stage 8. In the end of stage 8, they keep spawning new monsters again and again and again, which makes it difficult not only to dodge and deal with those monsters, but not to get hit by the boss and lose a life and then have to do it all over again. And it was just, by the time I got to stage 8, I was kind of done with the game, not only from a mental and physical standpoint. I was relatively done with the boss battles feeling the way they were, because there were several of them that I continued 20 times plus to get past them, and then when I got past them, I didn't feel like I gained the skill level to be able to consistently beat them. I feel like I just got good RNG, and that's what allowed me to get past the boss. It's fun enough to play, and it's interesting in design, but it's not one that I think is really all that great overall and doesn't really draw me into the cart. I think overall Thunderhop is better balanced than this one, even though it's almost more punishing than Glass in gameplay style. So I would probably stick with Thunderhop on this cart over Glass. Glass is interesting, and if you love it, fantastic. If you have some tips and tricks for me on how to deal with some of the later bosses and not get completely wrecked randomly, repeatedly, until you just kind of get a lucky break, I'd love to hear it, because I've never really been able to find much of a pattern on those guys. They're just very frustrating. The next 2 are my absolute 2 favorites on this cart, and the entire reason to own this cart, in my opinion. One is Alligator Hunter, where you play a kid that starts out on a skateboard and then gets in a spaceship. It's a very bizarre game with good music, great graphics. It's a screen shooter where you use the D-pad to aim and shoot. It'll give you a score at the end for the amount of brutality and the efficiency of how accurate you were and how much damage you did, that kind of thing. I went through the entirety of this game and was playing through about half of it again today just to get some footage on it, and still enjoying it my second or third playthrough. So this is definitely one that I kind of consider a game that's the reason that I bought this system in the first place, and that's because I never would have in my life, based off the cover art on this thing, bought a game called Alligator Hunter, or downloaded one called Alligator Hunter and tried it. I'm very happy I did, because it's a fun arcade experience. It almost screams light gun to me, but it works really well the way it is. You've got a dodge button, you've got a missile button, and then you've got your normal shoot button. And you get missiles by shooting the little alien alligator things that pop out of the ships when they're in there. So you can kind of just abuse one of them and get a ton of missiles, which is quite amusing and a lot of fun. There's a bunch of creative stages. There's some voice acting. The music's good. The gameplay's tight. I really recommend this one. I think this is a great game. Probably my absolute favorite on this one, just for the sheer creativity and lunacy of it, is Biochemical. Biochemical makes no sense in name and design. It's just really bizarre. It's kind of like somebody took the lead from Full Throttle, Blackthorn, mashed them together to make a character, and then threw them into Alice in Wonderland's Through the Looking Glass. It is probably the most bizarre setup for a video game I've ever seen. I can't even pronounce the lead character's name, but essentially you're in Toyland trying to get this prism back before this evil dude destroys Toyland. So there's all these crazy creative designs and stage layouts and huge frantic combat with like guns and stuff. It's just kind of amazing. Like the sheer creativity out of this game completely contradicts the name of the game and the bland cover art that it has. It's pretty stellar. It's a lot of fun. It's very challenging. It gets crazy hectic later on in the stages. I haven't quite completed this one yet. I think I got like 5 or 6 stages deep into this one, and was still having a blast with it, though there were a couple times I'm just like, you gotta stop spawning like 60 things on stage while trying to touch the checkpoint. And I was very glad there's a checkpoint system. The checkpoint system allows you to kind of push through these things, get to that pennant, and then start from there on your next continue, which makes it a lot more approachable than some of the other games that are actually on this cart. On top of that, when you're fighting the boss will recover some health when you die, but he won't recover all his health. So if you're not very good at fighting the boss yet, you can still kind of like brute force it, see all the phases of the boss, and still beat the boss. I only really put it down and didn't finish it because I just ran out of time to play it, and I didn't want to save state it. I wanted to go through the game again because I was having enough fun with it that I kind of wanted to see it through in one continuous run. So I highly recommend that one off this cart. Overall, I'd say that for like 20 bucks or so, getting 2 games, 3 potentially with Thunderhop, and maybe Glass if you can get around the boss fights, it's totally worth playing. I mean, not all of them are rock stars. I think Alligator Hunter and Biochemical are the best ones that are out on this cart in particular. But those alone, the fact that I've gone back and replayed them multiple times and I'm still having a good time with them even though I beat them, tells me that makes this cart pretty much worth owning, just for those 2 games alone. The rest of them, I think as I get a little bit more experience with Thunderhop, I'll have a lot of fun with that one. I don't think I'll spend too much time on the Snowboard Championship or the World Rally. I'm getting better at them as I play them, they're just not that fun for me. It's not the kind of game I lean to, it's not the kind of game I've ever really had a great time with, and these really didn't change my mind. They didn't bring anything super new to the party, anything crazy interesting, no mechanics that allow me to tweak things and make things better, or get new boards or get new racers or anything like that. They were what they were. And if you're into that kind of game, you'll probably love them. They just weren't for me. Glass, I don't know. That was an early favorite that tapered off the deeper I got into it and the more frustrating it got, and the more unfair the boss battles felt. So I don't know that I would really recommend that one, but 3 or so out of the cart, I'd say it's a solid cart for me. Let me know if there's any of these or any of these that I've done reviews on that you guys want to see a deep dive on. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, happy gaming.